Wake the up. No, I mean, seriously, it's time. You're going to make way more money
Yeah.
and you're going to leave the legacy that you deserve to leave for your kids, for our kids. This is what we need to do.
But what gets us there? What is the impetus behind that project outcome? It's people working together.
If we have financial difficulty, we're actually 18.3 times more likely to die by suicide.
If you could say one thing directly to anybody in the construction industry who's listening right now, what would it be? Hello and welcome back to the Human Side of Construction podcast, where we provide construction leaders with the insights they need to improve the industry and the great people in it. Today I'm sitting down with Josh Vitale, a former high voltage journeyman, lineman turned superintendent, turned one of the most important voices in construction worker wellness. Josh came up through the trades, IBEW, NECA apprenticeship, climbing poles for a living, and went on to oversee job sites with 7,500 workers and close to 40 million man hours, where he helped build Tough Enough to Talk, one of the most recognized mental health programs in commercial construction. He's now the co-founder of Project Built, a nonprofit dedicated to confronting addiction, suicide, burnout, and disconnection in construction, and he chairs Construction Suicide Prevention Week, the industry's largest annual awareness initiative, engaging hundreds of thousands of participants every year. He also successfully lobbied to get the construction workforce included in the Arizona State Suicide Prevention Plan, a policy level win most advocates in this space can't pull off. But what makes Josh so different is that he didn't study this crisis from a distance, he lived it. He's been open about his own PTSD, suicidal ideation, and personal grief, and he'll tell you straight up that he's a recovering superintendent. A deliberate framing that says the grind culture of this industry is something to heal from, not celebrate. Today we're getting into what psychological safety actually looks like on a job site when a quarter of your workforce is in crisis. We're talking about why awareness alone isn't enough. Josh's line is, you can't treat stage 4 cancer with awareness, and what it takes to move from education to real intervention and system design. We're talking about disconnection from family as the universal thread behind the crisis, and the models Project Built is building to actually do something about it. Josh, I'm honored to have you with me today, and I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation.
And I'm super flattered. And I feel like you have a team of researchers or something. Like you pulled out stuff that I had forgotten about myself. So it was really flattering.
There's stuff hiding all over the internet that I can find, Josh. You never know what's out there.
Impressed.
There's some stuff I couldn't share on the show, actually.
Oh yeah, I bet.
So, you've done a lot, based on that intro, but I like to start at the beginning. So, take me back. You started in the field as a high voltage lineman. You work your way up to running massive job sites pretty quickly. Maybe share a little bit about what your experience was like and when you realized something wasn't right about the culture and you needed to do something about it.
Yeah, great question. I always had a sense that there was something wrong with the culture. It never felt right? Like the hazing and the way that we treat apprentices and, the hierarchical nature of how we interact and just how chippy it is and just a lot of abuse, a lot of, just a lot of toxicity in the way that we treat each other. So I always kind of felt like an outsider. I wanted to do things different. And I can remember when I first got I got my first foreman gig. I hadn't even topped out yet. And they gave me a foreman truck and I was running a crew and it was just street lights, but, I had 4 or 5 guys on the crew and I can remember thinking, I'm going to do it different. I really want my people to feel better than I felt working for the guys that I've been working for. And so I just tried to find a better way. And I think I was only maybe 21, 22 years old at the time, but I started reading books like Good to Great and, How to Make Friends and Influence People. And I became a student of leadership. And so really, I just kind of tested with my crews how to get people to align, to a purpose and a goal instead of, trying to get them to do it because I told them to. Because honestly, for me, it had to be that way, being 21, 22 years old and having linemen working for me that were, 30, 40, 50 years old. They didn't want to hear anything I had to say. So I had to find a creative way around compliance and do it like, hey, let's have a contest to see who can terminate the fastest. I always had Gatorade ice down in my truck or even beer. I was always trying to take care of them and, little bribes like that, but earning their trust so that we could go get some work done and not hate each other at the end of the day.
But where did you get the idea to operate like that? Because I think a lot of people, maybe learn through osmosis, or they just assimilate with the culture of being that person, especially a super on site, the old school guy who's like loudest voice wins the argument, and throwing stuff and hitting tables and things like that. So what made you want to do things different?
It feel good, man. I think it was intrinsic, uh, I was that kid, right? I didn't want my teachers to be that way. I didn't want anybody to go through, and maybe it's because I was a victim of abuse from a young age. So I just didn't want people to feel like I felt in those moments. And then I would be triggered when somebody would get really aggressive or, verbally or psychologically abusive, and it made me feel gross, and I didn't want to feel gross. And then, at the end of the day, when you analyze, like, how am I showing up, what kind of person am I, if I just went and emulated that same behavior, then I wouldn't be the kind of person that I'd be proud of. And so I felt like it was an opportunity to try to do things different. And that's really, I think, just a common thread in the way that I'm wired, for whatever reason, was just always to try to find a better way to do things.
I think a lot of the issues, you mentioned like abuse and people coming in to the industry with things like that. It's a generational thing, right? It's passed down. People, especially, the men in the industry, were not taught how to deal with emotions. And you have this thing of what you think a man's supposed to act and what they're supposed to do. So, and our generation, you might be a little bit older than me, but I feel like our generation is really the cycle breakers when it comes to that things, thinking critically, being open to these things, vulnerability and all that, right? So, you know, talking about your experience and looking back on it from the outside in, everything looked like it was going great, right? Like you moved up pretty quickly, you were running big job sites, you were helping people. Uh, but what was really going on the inside? Like from the outside, by all respects, you were successful. People probably looked up to you and thought, wow, this guy's really got his shit together. But inside, what was actually happening?
Yeah, man. So, yeah, you touched on a very important piece of that. Like, to the outside, it seemed like I was doing well, making a lot of money for a 21, 22-year old, right? Driving a foreman's truck, not having to pay for it. My friends were jealous. I picked up the bar tab every time we went out, because they were all struggling to get their first job or still in school. And but yeah, I was really struggling with my identity, with my sense of self, with understanding, not even having a way to process my childhood, and not having any sort of mentorship or somebody that I could turn to when I wasn't feeling good. So I turned to, the camaraderie that was around partying. So, doing drugs, and I was a part of the like nightlife scene of electronic music, and I was DJing when I wasn't building power lines. And so I really got immersed in that. Like, there was like rave culture that was, kind of popular at that point in time. And so I got immersed in that. And so I was exposed to, some more progressive ideals, but in my psychology, I was still dealing with some deep, dark stuff. And, I lived with this, I guess, delusion that I was schizophrenic for most of my teens and 20s, because I had flashbacks from my childhood. And so I'd have these flashbacks, and I thought that meant that I was schizophrenic. And so I lived with this secret. And, not until years later, when I finally got into therapy and got some of that stuff worked out, that did I realize that they were flashbacks. So I just thought I was crazy. And I thought if I told anybody about it, or if anybody ever found out, I'd end up in the loony bin. And I didn't want that to happen. So, I just hid that secret. And slowly over time, right, and self-medicating and numbing, and self-medicating and numbing, and having, suicidal ideations, and praying that I would die, at night before I went to bed. During the day, I would just live the wildest, craziest life that I could think of. I can remember in college, I watched Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and then, got deep into the books, and became a student of Hunter S. Thompson and that kind of gonzo lifestyle. And I thought, hey, there's no way that I'm going to live past 35. So why not try to do everything, as wild and crazy as I can possibly do until I kick the bucket. I didn't plan to be around, 10 years ago. So I just figured, I might as well get as much in while I was around.
I think, and you've kind of shared your story before, and it sounds like it's very interesting, right? Like you got into some interesting things and you have a lot of neat stories, I'll say, but maybe what got you there wasn't the best intentions. But like, that's one side of things. But I think a lot of people listening can relate to your situation, right? Maybe not the exact instances and situations, but the fact that there's something going on behind this mask that you put on for everybody else in the world to see.
Yeah.
And I think it's getting better now, but with social media and Instagram and all this stuff, when you're scrolling through your feed and you're seeing, wow, this guy's got all these cars and he's got these chicks and he's on this boat and he's doing all this cool stuff. It's not fucking reality, buddy.
No.
It's not reality. That's what people need to understand. Nobody, and this has come up a couple times in this show from executive people, boots on the ground type of people. When you get later on in your life, you realize that nobody has their shit together. We're all just trying our best with the hand we're dealt and the tools we have. And I think the biggest issue is a lot of people don't have the tools to play the hand that they have, right? And like there's resources out there. One thing I've learned, you're not gonna get saved by somebody riding in on a white horse, like in the movies, but there are gonna be people there to support you on your journey. So, I think everybody can relate. So just going to some stats here, like, in construction, 25% of the workforce is actively experiencing a mental health crisis at any given time, right? So that's 1 in 4 people. Construction workers are 6 times more likely to die by suicide than a workplace injury. We lose roughly 6,000 workers per year to suicide and more than 10,000 to drug overdose in North America alone. Nearly half of construction workers have experienced symptoms of depression and anxiety, yet fewer than 5% see a mental health professional. So a lot of us, I shouldn't say all, a lot of us are struggling in silence. There's this stigma around it, right? So in your experience, you've worked on job sites with thousands of people. Picture that stat. A quarter of them are in crisis. That's almost 2,000 people on a single day, right? Every single day. Could be mild depression, could be clinical depression, severe anxiety, could be suicidal ideation. And very few people are talking about it. It doesn't make sense. So for you, I know you've had your own experience, but when did you witness it in other people and realize like, hey, I'm not alone? What did that look like?
Yeah. I didn't realize that I really did think I was pretty much alone in my like torturous existence. I thought it was like, I was just this sad sack and, my story was something that wasn't, shared by very many people, right? It was just a rare instance. And then, I was on a project and, Amy and I had a loss of a second trimester pregnancy, and I was really rocked by that. And I used our EAP to get help because it was right in the middle of COVID. I couldn't get an appointment to see a psychologist, and I wanted to be there for her and our other kids, but I didn't really have the tools to do that. And so I reached out to the EAP because I had heard about it during my orientation. And by the end of the phone call, we called the EAP. The EAP set up an appointment, and I had 10 free sessions with a psychologist lined up like the next day. So it was super helpful. And it really started this like second journey of mine towards, healing myself and then, trying to get involved and help other people. And, what opened up for me in that experience was I really still had a ton of work to do on myself. And I was recently sober at the time. So I was really starting to connect with who I was and kind of gain a North Star and find purpose in life. And my purpose in life that I came up with was I wanted to transform people's lives through experience. And I didn't really care what that experience was. And so I just started being open and really opening myself to the universe or whatever, and what was needed out there. Right. And so my mantra became, just get me out of the way and show me what you want to do. And so I heard that I talked to somebody in HR and I said, hey, look, that my experience with the EAP was transformational. If there's any way I can help share that with other people in our company, please let me know. And she was like, well, I don't know how you do that, but we've started this committee that's looking at suicide in construction because 2 people in your position died by suicide last year. And these were people that were like, no signs of mental illness. They were the leaders of the safety program and been running projects for 25 years. And, just everybody's best friend and great guys. And whatever happened to them, they snapped and obviously decided to take that path, and we lost them. But so I said, sure, I'll do what I can. I didn't realize that my story and my history and, what I had seen was going to be helpful to people at the time, but I knew that I wanted to help out. And I had a sense we talked about intuition the last time we were talking, but I had an intuition that it was where, I was supposed to be heading. It felt right. And so I just started getting involved, and then that opened me up. I was listening to a lot of Ram Dass podcasts and a lot of Alan Watts stuff. And I was reconnecting with the part of me that had experienced, something greater than myself throughout my life. And so I really just started experimenting on the job site. I was like, what if instead of doing this, like superintendent, you're going to do it my way kind of thing, what if I just started listening and see what happens? And,
Yeah.
I heard somebody say during that time that God shows up with skin on. And I was like, what if I just treated everybody like they were God and they were talking to me? And so I really played around with that idea, and it completely shifted the way that I was interacting with people on the job site. And what I realized was that all of my plans and the way that I wanted to manipulate things, they weren't nearly as good as what happened when I just listened to the people that were coming to me and sharing with me their ideas. So that's really where it started to go. And then, of course, being on a site during this crisis that we're in, we decided to start building community centers on the job site that were mental health focused. And so once that was built and in place, it was like the floodgates were open, and I became, you've heard me say it, they called me the suicide guy. And when somebody was in crisis, they would call me, and I was like, dude, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what the hell do you want me to do? And the directive was, you just leave them alone, like let them figure it out. We don't want to get involved. That's too risky. So that didn't feel right to me. That felt really fucked up. So I was like, what? I showed up, and I can remember the first kid that I sat with, and, he was like, he'd lost 22 people from the unit that he was in Afghanistan in the army with to suicide already. And he looked at me and he said, what else would I do? Like, what's the point? I said, man, I can't tell you what the point is for you, but I can tell you I've been where you're at, and I know what that feels like. And you're not wrong. Sometimes it feels like there isn't a point, but I can tell you that there are people that love you, and I'm here to be with you, and let's figure this thing out. And, there was a moment, right? And, when I was sitting with him and I was wondering what the hell I should say, I had this false sense of responsibility, like I was going to save him. And I really had to wrestle with that. And I started going to counseling and talking to a therapist about what was going on. What do I do if somebody dies that I'm trying to help? And that really helped me to work through my need to like heal people and fix things. And, the hero complex where I felt like nobody was there to save me. So now I was going to go save other people. And I had to come to grips with that piece of my psychological, makeup. And it was a really powerful, I don't know what you call it, like a pressure cooker for figuring out, what blind spots I still had in that whole hero complex, Jesus-y thing that my psyche likes to do, my ego likes to do. But, I don't even remember where your question was, but I think what I was trying to say was what got me into it was there was a huge need, and I just happened to be right place, right time, I guess.
I think that's, going back to a couple things that came to mind as you were speaking there, is people are afraid, I think, of doing the wrong thing. So I think there's two things that prevents people from acting in those situations. One, they don't know what to say, or they don't know what to do, and it's uncomfortable, so they don't act, right? And I could think back to situations before I was aware about this stuff, and I knew something was up, and I knew somebody was struggling, and I didn't do anything about it because I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to get too invested. I didn't feel like I could help them. And it still bothers me to this day, those 2 or 3 times where I was like, luckily that person didn't take their life, but if they did, like and it's not even about me, so I'm not going to go there. But so I think people shy away because they don't have the tools and they don't know what to do with it. And Yeah, so it's all about these types of conversations. Now, going back to the awareness piece. So, when we mentioned in the intro, you can't treat stage 4 cancer. Sorry, you can't treat stage 4 cancer with awareness. That's a direct challenge to what most of the industry is doing right now. Because we see a lot of posters, we see a lot of programs, we see a lot of toolbox talks, hard hat stickers, awareness weeks. Is it having an impact? And if awareness isn't enough, what is? Like, what's the next step in this evolution?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $25,000 question right now. What's going to move the needle? And, we're experimenting at this stage. So, Amy and myself and, we created Project Built to try to help with the family piece of it, because again, it's like you're not going to come up with a solution by sitting in a room with a bunch of therapists and talking about what they think we should be doing. Or, even people that are concerned, right? Like, as an advocate, as somebody that was doing it, I could have my design of what I think is going to be great, but it doesn't, the rubber is only meets the road once you start testing it. And the reason that we started working on the family retreat piece was that every single person that I've talked to in construction, in a good space or not, has a deep breakdown in their familial relationship. So I went to Spooner Lake. I did a retreat with Josh Rizzo and Justin Asbill for a mechanical contractor. And there was probably 30 superintendents, and their whole safety team was there. And we started asking them, like, what's the biggest hurdle you have in your life right now? And it was always the same thing. It was, my kids don't talk to me. I've been divorced 3 times. I have I just have a ton of problems with my family. And I've been out here sacrificing my life for them for the last 25 years, and they don't appreciate it. They think I've abandoned them. And so that's heartbreaking, man. It's so sad. And yet I get it. I've been there, and I'm there right now. I'm sitting here in a hotel room, 2,000 miles away from my family. And I guarantee my kids don't get it. And I can tell you right now, when I go to, marriage counseling here in an hour, my wife's not going to get it either emotionally, right? She might understand it intellectually, but it doesn't feel right. And I think you've talked about that. We were never meant to go, hunt the boar for dinner and stay away for months at a time or two. I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones. I get to fly back every couple weeks. But, for a lot of guys, it's months, years away. And so you lose that connection. You lose the sense that what you're doing is meaningful and that you matter. And you start to feel like a burden on your family. And, luckily we've been able to do lots of research over the years, but that disconnection from family and loss of hope, we've talked about this before. When those things converge, then it's like, what the fuck's the point? But what we're really understanding now is that we can fix the family piece. We can do a lot of things to build resilience around diet and exercise, getting enough sleep. Those are huge things when it comes to, insulating ourselves from, getting over our skis and feeling like there's no point in doing this stuff. And then, the other really interesting one that just came out recently in the last few months is that, so you said, right, 4 or 5 times more likely to die by suicide if you're in construction. One of the main drivers is because our identity is tied to providing. If we have financial difficulty, we're actually 18.3 times more likely to die by suicide. That's men. So that's a black swan for me right there. The family, and then figuring out financial insecurity for construction workers that are transient migratory birds that are flying around, making tons of money and then being out of work for months at a time. I mean, those 2 things right there, I think would really move the needle if we could figure those out. Not to say that we have it figured out.
There is a bit of irony in that, men, I think, are wired. Some of it is nature, some of it is nurture. I think, societal pressures, typically the man was the breadwinner. And things are different now with equality, but there's still a residual, there's still a systemic structure there, right? So that's one thing. The definitely family disconnection is a huge stressor, but also the isolation as well. Family or no family, when you're isolated and you don't have any community, that is a big issue too. What do you say to the old school guys? Because I encounter them online still, and I can share a story if I haven't already. about people saying, you know what, you have to be tough to work in construction. There's no room for this soft stuff. You got to suck it up. Life sucks. You know what? Your wife wants to leave you. Find another one. Just keep going. Power through. Push it down. Be a man. What do you say to those guys?
mean, God bless them, right? They got there because they had to get that hard in order to survive. But, it was like when they released seatbelts. Nobody wanted to wear a seatbelt, and you were a pussy if you had a seatbelt on. It's like, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
We're conditioned into this stupidity that's where, and unfortunately, that's where those guys are at. They're just stupid. And that's not their fault, right? It's a lack of training. I don't ever blame the person. I blame the system. And, they came up in a system that's who they had to become in order to survive it. And I get that. And like, if their kid is coming into the trades, they're going to try to insulate them in the same way. But that's where that generational trauma comes from. So we now have an opportunity and also a responsibility to change that, because if you know better, you do better, right? And if you're not, then just get the fuck out of here, because I don't have any time for people who know better and choose to go back to the other way of doing it and killing people and, treating people like shit. Like, I'm sorry, but I just don't have time for those people. And they need to learn that lesson, that they're not going to be accepted with whatever group of people we have that have found a new way to do things. And I think we're right in that transition period, right? So we're seeing a lot of tension, but I think that's good. If there wasn't tension, it wouldn't mean that we're threatening the bad folks.
I think that the change is happening, whether people like it or not. And part of it is just the evolution of the way the world works. I think it's largely driven by demographics, like younger generations coming in. They're less likely to abide by those systemic, archetypes, gender archetypes that people are trying to kind of fulfill when they get into that mindset. Going back to the irony piece, because I lost my train of thought earlier, the irony in needing to provide for your family, so going out and working, right? And maybe working far from home because it can make a little bit more money, or the opportunity is better. But the conflict you create by trying to avoid that exact issue is poetic in a sense, right? And you're not going to avoid that work. You're not going to avoid the remote projects. Those have to get built. Those have to get done. People have to go and do it. So what can we do to support those people? And that's what I love your take and what you're doing in supporting the family. Because to me, that is an obvious, I don't mean like, oh, you're not smart for thinking of it, but that's an obvious kind of hiding in plain sight solution to this issue. And I think a lot of people might be quick to say, that's not a work issue. That's a family issue. We can't, that's out of our jurisdiction. Well, guess what? The same guy or gal that shows up on your job site had to leave their family to get there. It's the same person. They can't flip a switch and turn it off, right? It's part of their human experience. And yeah, there, on one hand, it's a moral obligation because you want people to do well, you want people to thrive. But it's also like from a performance, like a strategy point of view. Like, you want your people operating at their best because you're going to get more productivity. You're going to get a safer worker. There's going to be less incidents. And that has a ripple effect, not only on their life, but they work with, the project outcomes, your insurance premiums, all this stuff. So that's how guys like us think, but I think we're crazy. How do other people think? Like, are they connecting these dots? Because to me, it seems like a pretty obvious thing, Josh. Like, are you getting traction with this? Are people understanding where you're coming from?
Not yet. Not yet. There's a very, very small subsection of leadership that gets it. I can remember talking to a CEO and I asked him directly, why the fuck are we not doing more? We could be doing more. I've given you the roadmap of how we can do more. Why aren't we doing more? And his answer, to sum it up, was, we've just got to wait for these people to retire and then we'll be able to. So, I told him that was the most pathetic answer he could have given, but, that's what he's thinking, right? And he's running a multi-billion-dollar company, and that's his prerogative to decide to sit on his hands until the loudmouths get washed out by retirement. But yeah, I don't think we're there yet. We have a lot of performative, bolstering going on, right? Like, companies that are saying, hey, people come first and then we work them 90 hours a week and watch them fucking crumble. But then there are some great people out there that are doing some really good things. And, I'm blessed to be involved with some of those movers and shakers that are out there changing things. And the companies that do adapt this stuff go from really struggling and having a tough time, making schedules and keeping their teams going and being strong, to having this complete reinvention of the way that they're interacting on a job site. And it really comes down to how well you're taking care of them as whole people, right? Are we
Yeah.
spending
Yeah.
enough time, like, instead of having the conversation, like, what did you get done? Ask them how you're doing, how's the family? How are your kids? Really understanding that these are human beings, and really that's why we're there, is to interact with other people that are on this journey with us. I wear this red thread bracelet. I know you've probably seen one before, right? But it's a really cool thing that is across a lot of human cultures. So, the Middle East, South America, all these cultures from all over the world, Kabbalah, they all had this red thread, even Japan and some of the Asian countries. And it's about how we're tied to each other in a deep way, and we're connected to people. And it's about the people that are on your journey are meant to be there. And if we can start to recognize that these human beings that we interact with are part of our story, that are important to us in our own development and our own, path to finding ourselves, it's really a beautiful thing. And I've been lucky to find that in this lifetime, to really get to interact with people like yourself, and Amanda and some of the other folks that
Yeah.
we know.
No, there's a lot of good people out there doing good work, and I feel like our collective voices are getting louder. And I feel like, even in the last 6 months, what I'm trying to do is starting to gain traction. And largely, we're still in an awareness phase, but at least people are willing to have these conversations, and it's a start. I think we still have a long way. So, a couple things, because we touched on a couple really cool topics there, and as long as my memory still works, I'm going to cover them. So on the first thing about leadership, right? I think the old school construction leadership, like you said, yeah, they're going to die out, they're going to retire, but that's not going to happen soon enough. We're still 5-10 years from all those old guys getting phased out. And we need people now. And people right now, younger people are coming in and they're being turned away because they don't want to put up with that shit. So we can't wait, you know. And yes, there is a cost to making change. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to cost money. You lose people. There's going to be issues. But there's also a cost of not acting and riding the status quo and just sitting on your hands and being idle. So there is a risk there. Another point on leadership, I think even I was brought up like this. When you think of a leader, at least me, my initial thought is somebody that knows what to do, and they're just directing and they're telling people and they know what to do. My mindset has shifted in having conversations with people like yourself and interacting with people with lived experience, because I have my own experiences and I've learned a lot and I've been through a lot, but so has everybody else, right? So just being open to other people, and instead of saying, giving them an answer and say, go do this, go do that, ask them. Ask them what they think, what the best course of action is, and then shut the fuck up and let them answer. It sounds simple, Josh, but it's really difficult. And it's the same with my wife. It's the same with my kids. It's the same with people I work with. I always remind myself, communication, we're taught it's about talking and responding, but it's really about listening and understanding what the other person are saying and what they're going through. And where my mind and where I'm going with this is these programs, like you mentioned, the performative nature of a lot of these companies. They might bring in somebody like a consultant and they have an EAP program and all that. But are you talking to your people? Is it what they actually need? And no, you're not going to meet the need of every person. If you got 3,000 employees, you're not going to talk to every single one of them. But do a survey, do a sample, get an understanding of what really matters and what's going to move the needle instead of just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall. Am I making any sense?
Of course, I was going to ask you, right? Like, the one leader that you think of when you think of, someone that you really respected. I know for me, it's the people that listened to me, the people that made me feel seen. And we've asked that question to hundreds, maybe even thousands of people across the country, construction folks, and they always pick that person, right? And then when you ask them why that person, and they go, well, because they saw me, they saw who I was, and they challenged me to be better. And you can only do that if you're really deeply listening and caring about people, and so who is that for
Yeah.
you?
So one guy comes to mind. I've mentioned it before, Jim Allison. And we didn't work together very long, maybe less than a year. And for the longest time, I was like, I don't know why this guy just sticks in my head and why he's the first person. Like, because there was never a profound moment where I'm like, he changed my life forever.
Yeah.
But the fact that I remember him and I included him in my books, like, it means something. And what did he do for me? This is what he did, Josh. And when I went to him with an issue, instead of telling me the answer, he would fucking sit beside me, like physically sit beside me and show me. He'd pull out the drawings. He'd go through it. He took time out of his day to be there and work through it with me, not just bark and answer and make it seem like he was annoyed for me even asking. And yeah, it took a little bit of time out of his day, but it had a huge impact on my life and other people I've worked with, because I know other people that worked with him too. So like you said, people, I think there's a couple basic needs and desires of any human being. They want to be valued, they want to be respected. And by value, you got to make money doing what you're doing. Don't get me wrong, I love construction, but a major driver of me going to work every day is so I can pay my bills and buy things for my kids. But being valued, being seen, contributing to something bigger than yourself, right? And I think we have opportunity of all those basic needs in construction, but how we go about it needs a lot of work. It's changing. You and I are doing the work to help evolve it, but yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity to do great things in this industry. We just got to treat people better.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of work to do in understanding how to even talk to each other. I'm on a project now, and there's just a ton of butting heads and peacocking, right? Like a bunch of banny roosters that are sitting in a room trying to like pretend like they've got it figured out. We really don't know, and we're not collaborating on a deep level because we forget that we're there to care for each other. And luckily, there are some really great programs that are out there. So if your audience is listening and they want to help figure out, how they can get their team communicating, Belma and Jess are two great friends of mine now, and they started this program called Proactive Communication, and it's for construction. It's based on Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication method that was, sort of invented in the 70s. And it's a wildly wonderful way to get everybody speaking the same language. And it's not about conflict, like resolution. It's about, you just don't have conflict when you really listen to people and you show up as a curious person, and then you give people what they need, right? So even if they're upset and you just take a moment, make it not about you, and go, oh, wow, that really does suck that you didn't hit your deadline today. How can I help? What do you need help, or do you just want to vent? And they go, oh, well, I guess I just wanted to vent. And then, okay, now we're moving on, right? It took 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I didn't make it all about me and that you were somehow coming down on me because you're upset about whatever's going on in your life or on your piece of the project. And now we're moving forward and we're a team. So, that's a great way to do it. Justin Asbell, who I mentioned earlier, him and Josh came up with this Frontliners program that's like a whole leadership and setting the North Star and, having a framework for really building that and not doing it from a clinical lens. Like this is, he's a Marine and an ex-firefighter and a safety director. And, Josh is the guy that won a Bronze Star, and they put this stuff together because it works, and it works for construction folks. And it's in a language that they can understand. And so finding those people with lived experience that have created solutions, that's really where it's at. You're not going to find this coming out of Cornell University. Bless them for the work that they do, but you're not going to find it coming out of any university, right? When I go talk at Arizona State to grad students and I ask them what they would do if there's a suicide on their project, you know what their first answer is? Figure out what OSHA is going to do, right?
Okay, yeah.
How much trouble are we going to get in with OSHA? And I'm like, guys, let's make a plan for how we treat the family. So I had the class go through it, right? And I'm like, okay, look, your compliance department is already taking care of OSHA and any of that stuff that you have to do. Your job is to make people feel better. What are you going to do? And I watched them just, their heads crack open for a minute. And they're like, wow, I never thought about the actual people that are working. but
Yeah.
man, they came up with some really incredible ideas. They were solving things and going out and, creating things that I'd never thought of. Right. And so I think once we're exposed to the idea that we don't have to fix it in a sense of like this mechanical way of doing it, and that we really just have to wrap our arms around people, it shifts the way we think about the job site and the project and the deadline and all that stuff. Because all of those things are products of us creating an environment or an ecology where people can thrive. And when people thrive, they do way more than we can like measure with KPIs. You know what I mean?
For sure. No, it's my brain is just all the wheels are spinning here. But it's such a technical and transactional industry, right? We are taught and we're programmed to achieve the end goal, right? Scope, schedule, and budget. Here's your scope, here's your schedule, finish it before that within the budget. That's it. And so everybody's focused on the numbers and like you said, the KPIs and all this. But what gets us there? What is the impetus behind that project outcome? It's people working together.
Right.
So why, this is maybe a rhetorical question, but like, why isn't more focus put on that side of things? Because you can't tell me that, a lot of times how are we going to shorten the schedule here? We're behind. How are we going to pick things up? It's always mechanical solutions. Bring in more guys, bring in more equipment. But maybe the crews are operating at 60, 50, 40% because of the site conditions or because of morale or something like that. Why is the first solution always, here's throw more guys at it, throw more equipment at it, throw more money at it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude. I mean, you've heard about the study with the mice, right? Where they, they give the mice the cocaine water bottle and they just hit that thing until they overdose
Yeah.
and die. But when they changed the environment to one where they were all thriving, they didn't even go for the cocaine water bottle anymore. I mean, that's what we're asking people to do on our job sites, right? We're like, here, just let's give you an empty box. Let's treat you like, this isolated mouse. And of course, you're going to, lean on drugs. You're going to be miserable and you're not going to be productive, and look, I'm not saying that people aren't capable of working long hours, but we have to facilitate that in a way that makes it sustainable, right? We got to take care of their bodies. We have to take care of their minds. We have to give them an opportunity to go and recharge. There's some theories out there about like resources, right? Like we have like the human existence. We have a certain finite amount of resources, and construction extracts those resources at a much higher rate than other jobs do because it's so dangerous. You're away from your family. You work long hours and you get, very little feedback in a positive way for doing it. So you're sucking all of these resources out of people and they never actually have a chance to recharge. So, if we
Yeah.
can find a way, and I'm not saying that we have found a way yet, but we have to be looking at, okay, how do we ensure that those resources are getting recharged? And, one of the ways that you can do that, I believe, is by, having a North Star and creating a culture that people feel welcome and seen and appreciated. And, like we work really hard on these big projects to create an environment with a heated, insulated lunch tent. And, we have a kinesiologist on site where we're making sure people's bodies are working properly, but that's not happening at these like home builders across the country that make up 90% of the construction workforce. So I don't know how we do it without the big budgets, but we do have, I guess the mandate, right? From people like you and me and some of the other folks that we know that we're going to do this, we're going to figure it out. It's just a matter of, how to best take advantage of what we know now and then continue learning and continue adapting to try to create an environment where people can survive it.
I think part of the issue in the conversations we have, this whole thing around mental wellness and psychological safety, it's such a big, hairy, under research, not well understood animal. Right?
Yeah.
So I think the biggest hurdle is people look at this thing and it's like a huge mountain and they're like, well, I want to climb it. I know the right thing is to climb it. where do I take my first step, or where's the first hold that I can dig into? And I think you touched on it. And one of the questions I wanted to cover is like, what what is that foundational level? What is the first step for somebody kind of just starting this journey? You've been working on yourself for a long time. I've been through my own stuff too. What do you wish somebody told you um, at the beginning of this journey that you've been on?
Boy, that's a tough one, right? Because a lot of times it's a blind spot, and it's not a blind spot until you have that like dark night of the soul. You got to be up against it. You've got to, run out of answers and, hallways that you can hide in. And then at some point you go, just don't have I don't have the answer. So then you start to look, and, my path is not, certainly not one that I would ever recommend anybody going down. So, I think you can do it as early as you want, right? The lessons are always there. And I can look back at, my teen years, and they were the same lessons. I just was really hard headed and I didn't listen. So the lessons got louder and louder and louder and louder and louder until I couldn't ignore them anymore. And, I think some people, they don't ever wake up and take notice of those lessons, and that's where we lose people. Um, but I would say listen to that small, still voice inside of you, because it's telling you exactly what you need. You know your purpose.
Yeah.
It's there. If you just sit long enough, maybe an easy way to start is like journaling. And you don't have to write poetry. You don't have to be good at it. Just write some shit down and get it out of your head. That's a great way to do it. I think breath work was what worked for me. And then breath work that led to guided meditation, because I couldn't be still for very long on my own at first, but guided meditation helped. And then I moved into meditation, and then, just listening to guys like Ram Dass, Alan Watts. It could be anybody, somebody that resonates for you. It could be poetry from Rumi. It could be on the golf course. If your mind shuts off and you're in the flow state when you're walking around golfing, or, you go out and fish, getting into nature, I would say, is probably one of the best ways to do that. Getting grounded. I'd go for a swim. I don't know. There's a million ways to do it. You just got to find the one that you're called to.
Yeah. No, for sure. And one thing, common theme that I'm hearing from you, and I share it too, is it starts with self-awareness, this whole journey. I think a lot of people, and maybe it comes with age, maybe younger people, they're just not there at a consciousness level or whatever you want to call it, but they just don't have a hard look in the mirror or just sit with themselves and be like, what do I actually need? It's always like you're trying to find, where do I fit in? Do I fit in here? I'm going to try this out. And that's part of it, trial and error. But just like you said, the answer to life's questions, and we're getting a little deep now into some Alan Watts
Hey,
shit,
I'm
but I
down.
think the answer to life's questions is within each and every one of us.
Right.
I remember seeing a quote, it might have been Salvador Dali, who I know you commented on a recent post of mine,
Oh yeah.
but it might have been him or somebody else, but it was, the meaning of life is to find your unique gift, right? That only you possess. The purpose in life is to share it with the world. Okay. And some people might hear this and be like, oh, what's this guy talking about? I work in construction. Does he want me to go paint? It's like, no, but find your actual purpose in construction. You don't have to fit into that alpha male stereotype, be a man, suck it up, power through. Because you've got feelings, man. As a human being, you got shit. Shit happens and you got to deal with it. So it's okay, whatever experience you've had, whatever you've gone through, it's okay. It's not your fault that it happened. But, it happened for a reason, and you're kind of on this journey, and it's up to you to figure out where it's going. And don't try and fit yourself into other people's boxes. I know I kind of asked you that question and I answered my own question, but that's what I wish somebody told me
Yeah.
a while ago. There's nothing wrong with you as you are. You're just finding your way.
Yep. We need all of the trees in the forest. Like, you don't walk through the forest and look at one and go like, oh, that one's stupid, or oh, that one grew funny. That you appreciate all of them for their differences. So, why do we do that with humans? We're like, oh, that, they look funny, or they act different, or whatever. That's bullshit. That's us sitting in judgment when we don't want to be judged ourselves. So if we can accept that and,
Exactly.
love people for who they are, we're better off.
Right. Very wise words. So last question here, we'll wrap up, and I like to ask everybody this. If you could say one thing directly to every owner, every CEO, every CFO, every superintendent, anybody in the construction industry who's listening right now, not what they want to hear, but what they need to hear, what would it be?
Wake the fuck up. No, I mean, seriously, like, it's time. You're going to make way more fucking money
Yeah.
and you're going to have the best. You're going to leave the legacy that you deserve to leave for your kids, for our kids. This is what we need to do. So wake the fuck up.
Love it. No bullshit with this guy. Really appreciate your time, Josh. Thanks for coming on. And it's been a real honor. So thank you.
Hope that gives somebody goosebumps when they watch this.
I'm tingling right now, man. I'm tingling all over.
Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to the human side of construction. If you're a construction professional and you have a similar story you'd like to share, or you're a company leader who wants to share how you're dealing with these workforce challenges, mental wellness, tech adoption, anything, please reach out. Love to chat. Take care for now. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, buddy.